Welcome back, everyone. This is the Profitable Steward podcast. I'm recording this on January 12th, and it's actually my mother's birthday today. So happy birthday in heaven, Mom. I'm grateful for her. Each of us come from a great legacy, and it's also my daughter's birthday, who is her namesake. So happy birthday, McKady. We're really glad to have Brandon Rains here today. Brandon is joining us from Colorado, and as we get started, we're just finishing up 2025. And even if you're listening to this podcast later on, I think this message is going to be relevant. Let me start off by saying this morning I was working with a client, and he's actually somebody that Brandon knows from Nebraska, and we were into their books and trying to clean up year end. They're brand new to Ambrook, and Ambrook is the accounting software that we now endorse at Ag Steward just because it served our clients so well to be able to get their numbers in order. And so I encourage you, if you love QuickBooks, stick with it. If you're not happy with it, really encourage you to check out Ambrook. We'll put a link in the show notes to that. So Brandon, tell these folks where you're from and a little bit about what got you to this point. I guess we need to say, what's your profession, first of all? I mean, you don't identify, I'm sure, when you introduce people. I know you're a husband and you're a father, but you're also an attorney, and don't let that scare anybody away here. Stick with us. So you're not going to be bored to death in this podcast. We're going to keep it interactive, but tell these folks a little bit about who you are.
Yep. So in classic attorney fashion, I won't guarantee that you won't be bored to death, right? In this. So, but we'll try. So I'm an estate planning attorney. So, think of that as wills, trusts, powers of attorney. It's going to be part of our conversation today. Just basically saying, hey, when something bad happens to you, what happens with your family? What happens with your farm, your ranch, whatever, business interests, personal assets, stuff like that. I'm originally from the East Coast. My dad was a chemical engineer. We moved around a lot in the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic states. Went to Utah for a lot of my college education. Met my wife here in Denver, Colorado, in between degrees. Graduated from law school, moved back to Denver, and been here ever since. So started my own firm about a decade ago, and has just built it from scratch.
Awesome. Well, great for that context. So I was trying to think who actually introduced us, but it's been a little while ago, and I don't remember who did, but you've served our clients really well. Like, I've not gotten a negative response at all from any of them. They've been very pleased with your fee structure, very pleased with your upfront nature, and just that you really care beyond just, hey, I'm going to suck some money out of you. And I really appreciate that. That's one of the things that led me to you, and so while these principles that we talk about, they're going to be things that maybe apply directly to your practice, but as whoever your attorney is, your professionals, I would encourage you to ask these same questions of them. And so hopefully this will serve you to be able to know the right questions to ask when you go in to meet with the professionals that are hopefully on your team. So first of all, I like the set fee structure. I like being able to say, okay, this is what it's going to cost us to be able to get this scope of work done. And to me, that's important. So we just don't add up hours at attorney's wages and then get a big surprise in the mail by that bill. And so is that typically how you operate, or are there sometimes when it is just on a billable basis?
We try to be as flat fee as possible. Most estate planning attorneys are flat fee as well. Decent amount of business attorneys, especially if we're starting a business, is going to be flat fee also. There's definitely some situations in which hourly billing makes a little bit more sense, just when there's a lot of variables of, whether that's contract review or stuff like that. Well, it depends on how many contracts that need to be reviewed. It depends on the type of contract, the length of contract. But a lot of attorneys in this, I'm going to help you set something up, and there's not a party in opposition to what we're doing. It's easier for that to be a flat fee type of a setup.
Yeah, makes sense. And you mentioned business startup. I think that's a good place to start. I get the question a lot, okay, should I form an LLC? Sometimes we're generating multi-million-dollar businesses. We have maybe multi-million dollars in assets, and we're still just operating out of our family checkbook, and we don't have a corporation. The land is held in our personal names. So can you kind of walk through what are the steps, and maybe at what point should somebody say, "Hey, I need an entity to be able to run this business"? Let's start with that one.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think what's also important too is that some of the answers you're going to be getting as you're talking to different professionals is probably going to be a little bit different depending on the professional that you're talking to. What I mean by that is an actual business entity is going to have a couple different considerations, right? There's asset protection, right? And there's taxes and just affordability, profitability, right? An accountant is going to have a lot to say, is going to be coming at it from a lens of taxes, right? Is it an LLC? Do we make an S corp election? They're going to have a lot of insights on taxes, whether it's minimizing taxes or maximizing the amount of take home money that you get from the business and stuff like that. Profitability, affordability, Jared, honestly, that's you as a business coach, if you will, for business, for farmers. You're going to have some really amazing insights into when does it make sense to have a business from a, are you profitable? Are you not? How profitable are you? And from
Hmm.
my perspective, and feel free to jump in with your perspective on that, Jared. For me, as an attorney, I kind of jokingly tell people that I'm paid to be paranoid. And so
Hmm.
I mostly look at it from an asset protection standpoint, where if someone happens on your farm and someone gets injured, what's the ownership of the land? What's the ownership of the equipment? What's the ownership of whatever? And the ownership will go a large way in determining who can be sued for damages.
Hmm.
If you own those things personally, well, then you can be personally sued and personally liable and having to use your personal assets, including the business, to satisfy any judgment, any damages that come out of that lawsuit. Where if you own in an LLC or a couple different LLCs, I know Jared, with some of our mutual clients, you've talked about put the land in one LLC and the equipment in another LLC. You're able to protect your personal assets from the farm assets. And depending on how many LLCs you have, you can protect those assets in each LLC from a lawsuit against the other LLC, right? So if it's a lawsuit purely against the land, right, there's an irrigation ditch and someone steps in an irrigation ditch and they get a compound fracture in both legs, or I don't even know, right? Something just absolutely amazing. There has just this big, ginormous problem, and there's no equipment involved, for example. Then your equipment that's in a different LLC from the land is protected from that lawsuit against that injury that happened on the land, as well as your personal assets, right? Where if
Hmm.
you have it all in one LLC, then the equipment would be vulnerable to that lawsuit. And if there's no LLC, then everything is vulnerable. And so that's kind of the perspective that I come from, is asset protection. And from that
Yep.
perspective, there's really not a too soon moment to create a business, because accidents can happen. That doesn't matter how big the business is. That doesn't matter, the revenue or anything like that. The bigger the business, the more the revenue, possibly the more land there is, the more equipment there is, there's a better chance of something happening. But there's no universal law saying no accidents can happen on any farmland lower than 120 acres and
Sure.
operating revenue of $1 million, right? And so that's, from my perspective, that's what that is. From an from a protection standpoint, there's not really a too soon moment to get a business set up.
Yeah. Yeah. Good answer. I appreciate that. And I know the rule of thumb that I use is at the point when it turns from a hobby to a business. Usually that's around the $100,000 mark. That $100,000, and people are going to wonder, okay, is that gross or is that net? Let's just say it's $100,000 gross. That's a decent amount of revenue. That could replace somebody's off-farm income. That could mean that a spouse could step away from their job in town and they could take that enterprise and run with it. That's the point at which I say, okay, it's time to put this thing into a some type of a corporation and run it as a business. Separate it. And this is largely from an accounting standpoint too, is it's a lot easier to track your personal books and your business expenses separately. It's going to be way easier for your CPA to be able to break that out as well. So from a logistics standpoint, that's kind of my rule of thumb. But I like how you mentioned that it's recommendable in many cases to have different LLCs. different entities. Does it ever make sense to have an S corp as an operating company, or when would you say S corp over LLC?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's going to be a tax question, right?
Okay.
It's going to be the accountant who's going to be asking that more than anything. Most of the time, what we see are LLCs that have taken an S corp election, right? So for tax purposes, it's treated as an S corp. That's where I'm coming from with that.
Okay.
My answer, right? It's not necessarily, hey, an LLC versus um, a straight S corp, organized as an S corp, taxed as an S corp, stuff like that. And so, at least from my perspective, it's mostly going to be a question of taxes. S corps and LLCs behave differently for federal income tax purposes, of expectations of self-employment pay, of different types of deductions and stuff like that. So normally when I get into those types of conversations, I defer to an accountant for stuff like that.
Yeah, good. And so would you recommend that a person have the attorney and the accountant meeting at the same time to be able
I
to kind of synergize that answer?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a big fan of getting all of the different professionals in the same room at the same time, right? I mean, you're
Yeah.
you're you're a farmer or a rancher, you're busy farming and ranching, right? Any moment that you spend being the middleman between professionals is time wasted, right?
Hmm.
You're not making as much money as you would like to be able to make, most likely. And so I think if it's you be in that meeting, because ultimately you're the boss, you're the one who needs to be making those decisions, but not having to be the middleman, having all of the professionals in one room, having that conversation is my preference. I think that's the best way to go about it because you're getting all that information at the same time. It's easier to have a live conversation like this and like you said, to come up with a synergized answer when there's a
Hmm.
live conversation back and forth rather than via emails and who knows how long it's going to be until someone actually responds to that email. And if it takes too long, you have to read the entire email chain to remember what in the world we were talking about 2 weeks ago. And so I'd say live conversations, virtual, actually seeing each other's
Yeah.
face helps a lot. If you can't do an actual in-person meeting, do a face-to-face virtual meeting is the best way to do it. That's my preference.
Yeah. Mine too. Mine too. I really like that. And the other thing that I found is I don't always know the right questions to ask. So it helps to have somebody else who has more expertise and experience and they can ask those questions and then we can find the solution quicker. Um,
Sure.
okay, so have everybody in the same room, everybody on the same page, working towards the same goal. One of the things that we start out with, which I think is really helpful and I would encourage this for anybody before they go and meet with their professionals, is create what their vision is. Where do they want to end up? And we usually start with a 3-year vision, but in this case, you're going to be looking out a lot further. Like what do you want to see, and even 7 generations down the road? That seems crazy, right? But if we adopt that mentality of what do we want our legacy to be for generations to come, and we're able to have that solidified in our mind as a husband and wife team or between the generations that go and meet with our professionals, then we will know when they mess up. We'll know, like, hey, that may be a boilerplate deal that works for everybody else, but I want to adjust this. And that's one of the things that I'm not afraid to do for our clients is push back and say, no, you may have a good reason to do this, but this is what they want. And unless you can talk us out of it, let's steer it in this direction. Can you speak to that a little bit about what the client's role is when they come to meet with you as an attorney and ideally their CPAs in the room also?
Yeah, so when I'm working with clients, especially within that estate planning context, right? Of if something bad happens to you, then what? It's I like the 7 generation idea, right? What would you like to see happen if you could influence the decisions that that seventh generation is making? How would you like to be able to influence that, right? That's a
Hmm.
conversation. That's a human-centered, values-based conversation, right? That is incredibly difficult for that to be a purely financial conversation, right?
Hmm.
Because that is much more changeable and fungible over time than who we are, right? We want those values, whether that's hard work, faith, grit, stick to itiveness, charity, benevolence, call whatever you want to, right? Whatever
Hmm.
you feel like your family stands for are those core principles that you most often want to see happening down the road. And
Hmm.
so really what I ask clients to do is try to come up with an idea, try to come with an idea of your values. So think of those as adjectives, right? Persevere,
Hmm.
hard work, determination. Think of those as maybe adjectives, right? If that helps. What type of people would you like your loved ones to be? What are your goals, right? Which sometimes is going to be values based, but that might actually also be financial goals.
Hmm.
What are your concerns, right? Where do you want to end up? And then what might prevent you from getting right? And I try to make it as simple for people as possible. The simpler you can make it, the better. If clients can come understanding what their goals are and what are their concerns, then we can more easily apply those things to their situation, right?
Hmm.
Is it farming? Is it ranching? What state do you live in? How many kids do you have? What are your assets outside of your farming and ranching efforts? Then we can take all of that information and begin to understand what type of legal solution is the best fit to do all of those things. And that's not just
Hmm.
a picture, hey, are we doing a will or a trust, but it's who's getting what? When are they getting it? Who's making the decisions? How are we treating each of your kids? Because they're all different. They're all in different situations in life. And sometimes they all have completely different personalities. But sometimes some are more ready for certain things than others. What are their ages? Sometimes age matters, right? The needs that a 25-year-old versus a 15-year-old are drastically different. And we have to kind of plan for where you are in life right now and then maintain that relationship over time so we can adapt and amend over time. And so
Hmm.
that's really what I'd say is what helps the most is understanding your values, those multi-generational goals, those, 3-year goals, Jared, that you kind of mentioned. As well as what are the concerns and what's the family situation collectively and individually. You all are the life experts in your life. I am certainly not the life expert in your family life, right? I'm the legal expert. And so you come with your expertise and I'll come with my expertise. Jared comes with his expertise. The accountant comes with their expertise. And that way we're able to, and again, as long as Jared, kind of what you mentioned, as long as we're collaborating, we're going to
Hmm.
come up with something that at the very, very least, the sum equals the value of its parts, or
Yeah.
ideally even something even more so.
Even more. Yeah.
Yeah. So come
Yeah.
with those
That's really
things.
good.
Yeah, come with those things and being willing, just like you said, push back, ask questions, make decisions. It's not my life, right? It's not my life. It's not my family. It's not my land. It's not my money. It's not my place to tell you what to do. My place is to give information and advice and counsel and maybe even recommendations of what makes the most sense, depending on the situation. I don't even like to give recommendations.
Yeah.
Most people don't need them. And
Hmm.
so come with those things and be ready to ask questions, to push back, to make decisions, because ultimately it's your life. No matter how much Jared or I care about you, it is impossible for us to care about your situation as much as you care about your situation. And no one's going to have to
Yep.
live with the consequences, both positive and negative, of whatever decision. So don't abdicate that. Be ready to make decisions and ask questions until you have perfect clarity about your options and perfect comfort with the final decision that you're making.
Yeah. Really well said. I appreciate that. Just followed up with some clients this morning, and they've been working with you to get their estate plan in place. I'm not sure if you recommended it or if I recommended it, but they wrote a kind of a preamble to their documents,
Mhm.
completely in their words, describing what they wanted for their heirs. And I think that's genius, because if somebody, let's just say generations down the road, they get a hold of this document, that's the first thing that they're going to see is
Mhm.
what their grandma and grandpa wrote. And to me, that's going to be a lot more meaningful than the rest of the things inside. It's going to add a lot more context for what their desires were
Yeah.
when they were in good health and sound mind. And they presented this to their adult children this last over Christmas.
Yeah.
And they said it was very well received. Their intention is that that family unit stays intact, that everybody stays married, that the land passes on for generations. They know the odds are stacked against them because that is not statistically proven out. Statistics are 50% of their kids are going to get divorced, that land will be divided multiple ways. But I told them, you've done your part to be able to ensure that this can happen. And so I would encourage that. I don't know if that's something you encourage, that kind of that personal touch to the legalese that comes into the rest of the documents. But I thought that was genius.
Yeah. Yeah, so much of what we do as professionals is very much focused on the who, the what, and the how much,
Hmm.
which is great, which is absolutely essential. It's so hard to find success without addressing those things. But that preamble, I like that term preamble, is designed to address the why. What are your motivations, right? And the who, the how much, the when, the what, to me only has meaning that it gets from the why. What's the purpose? What's the motivation? The why is actually what infuses meaning into these cold, heartless tax returns and estate planning documents and stuff like
Yeah.
that, right? And the more that people can understand what your why was, why you made the decisions that you did, can they ever begin to have any type of empathy, right? And clarity into what you are trying to accomplish. Because otherwise, my documents are just a financial transaction from parent to child. This is how much you're
Mhm.
getting. This is when you're getting it. It's an ATM. That's really all it is. But when you understand the why, the money becomes a means to the end rather than just the end itself.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
powerful stuff.
That's good. And I think just much like the U.S. Constitution, right, that preamble to it gives meaning to the rest of it. And so I'm going to encourage all of our clients to do that, to take the time, whoever, regardless of who they're working with, because I think that will provide a lot of meaning. So I just had an idea here. What if we just role played? And I know we're going to have to consolidate and condense some things, that maybe would go over a few meetings. But
Sure.
what if we did this and I just said, "Hey, I'm Joe Blow," and I walk in off the street, and we could just start with, you tell me where we start.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm multi-generational rancher. We'll say I'm a little bit younger than I am. I'm in my mid-30s. We've got a few kids at home, and dad's estate is settled. This has come to us. My siblings are settled. So that generation's done with. We're looking at, okay, how do we do for the next generation? So my heirs. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit of the context. So we're grossing about 500,000 a year. Cattle market's really good. And we've got some debt, and that keeps us up at night sometimes. But with this, if cattle prices stay good, we'll be able to manage that. We've been to the Ranching for Profit school. I know that I need to keep my numbers straight. They told me when I left that I needed to get an estate plan in place and that I needed to get an LLC. And so Jared gave me your number, Brandon, and help me out. Where do I get started here?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think again, really, I'd be interested to learning more about your family, your kids, right? Planning a ranching succession with teenagers and below is more difficult than 20 years from now when your kids will be in their mid 20s, right? Your age.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but really trying to get a feel for what would you like to see happen with the ranch. Most, and I think you probably agree with this, Jared, is most people would like to see the ranch to remain intact and generally speaking going to one child. Lots of times, also in my experience, there's normally only one child who's interested in maintaining the ranch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very rare. It seems to be kind of rarely are there more than one. And so I'd be interested in your goals, your concerns, and ultimately who do you have in mind with passing the ranch onto after you pass away, if you know just yet,
Yeah.
right? Um, that would be a big part of the conversation.
Okay. What about guardians over the children? I assume at this age, if they're under 18, that's going to be a key part of what we work on.
Yeah, I mean, guardianship is right up there. That's decision 1A or 1B, right? So
Okay.
you'll have the ability to choose who those guardians are, to say who you want to be making those parenting decisions after
Mm-hmm.
you pass away. You'll also have the ability to decide who's making the financial decisions after you pass away as well, especially in regards to, well, really any financial decision, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's paying the bills, settling your estate, just like your parents' estate was just settled, as well as running the ranch, maintaining it, or potentially selling it down the road if there aren't any kids that are willing to take it on.
Mm-hmm.
How do we bridge the timeline gap between date of death and a child being able and ready to take over. That might be 5 years, that might be 15 years.
Hmm.
Who's running that? Who's doing that? So that's something to be thinking about as well, is who do you trust to run the ranch and keep its doors open, if you will. Keep it functioning, keep it profitable, stay on top of that debt, pay it off, stuff like that. That's a lot of what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so once you kind of have that figured out of, where do you want that money to go? Is there a specific child you have in mind or whatever? Then we can have a conversation of, okay, what do we want to be doing to take care of the other kids?
Okay.
Right. Because if,
Yeah. What are some of the, well, let me just pause here for a second. Even as you're asking me this, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I mean, I'm not role playing here. This
oh
is me.
no, oh no,
I'm like, oh,
good.
dang. And that could just be me. I get over if I have more than like three decisions to make, I'm like, okay, I'll just put it off. I'll just go back and go to work. And then that email sits there just like what you described. And then I'm the one who's the weak link in the chain. I've got to go back and be like, oh, what did we talk about? Man, let me pull up my notes and let me refresh my memory.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so, but I think it's worth inserting for just a second here. How do you help people get past that? Because this is, for most of us, it's brand new, right?
Yeah.
We didn't take a college course. Nobody did. And then we were faced with all these decisions, like life-changing decisions. Who's going to care for my kids? Who's going to run this ranch? It's
Yeah.
just,
So I
it can be kind of overwhelming.
can be. Yeah. You're not the first. Um,
Okay. Okay. Phew.
I was starting to feel bad. I was like, hold on a second. So that first meeting, instead of being 5 minutes, which I kind of just threw everything at you, is generally an hour to an hour and a half.
Okay.
And it's not just like this is what I need, this is what you need to decide. It's you did a good job kind of throwing the role playing at me a little bit. But it's be more like, hey, do you have who do you have in mind, if anybody, that you would like to serve as a guardian for your kids? And you may be like, well, I don't know. Like, what are we talking about? What does a guardian do? What does a guardian
Yeah.
mean? And I was like, okay, well, a guardian is a person who's making those day-to-day parenting decisions, right? They're not having to make financial decisions if you don't want them to, but they're the ones who are signing the release form for school trips. It's the people who are deciding who's cooking the food, who's
Mhm.
establishing a curfew. It's stuff like that, right? So it's the skill set of whose parenting style either do you trust the most, or do you feel like is most similar to your parenting style? And a lot of people will also have an opinion about where those options live, right? So it's like sometimes they care, sometimes they don't care about if their kids can stay locally or move to a different state or whatever, right? And hopefully, Jared, as I kind of took a little bit of time explaining just a couple extra, 2 minutes,
Yeah.
you have a
Yeah.
garden, you're like, I've got a couple names, right?
Yeah.
And so, which you probably didn't before because I wasn't going for names, but
And I didn't probably hadn't even thought of that necessarily. Like, well, yeah, that's something that he's gonna ask me about until we sit down across the table from each other.
yeah, yeah. And so we take more time than we just did. And then
Sure.
we at least send people, and we don't ask people to make decisions in that hour and a half long meeting. It's really just, these are the things to think about. These are your options. We're broadening your horizons of what's possible, right? And then at least for us, every attorney is different, but then we give you some paperwork. We email you some paperwork after that first meeting that we say, okay, these are our options, right? Now, let's slowly put those blinders on, if you will. Now that we've seen
Hmm.
everything, and really start focusing on who do we want to be the guardian? Who do we trust to be making those financial decisions? What about medical decisions? Now that we've described what they are and what they do, and give you time, right? A couple weeks for you to think about, while you're driving that tractor, while you're, throwing whatever it is you got to do at those annoying, frustrating cattle because they don't want to go where you want them to go, and whatever it is I don't.
Yeah.
Don't throw stuff, right? But yeah. Sometimes you want to, right?
Yeah.
But you have time to think about, and that's
Yeah.
how I am, right? I'm a slow processor. I marinate. I run things through my head until I get settled,
Yeah.
until I have that settled feeling, right? I'm kind of reaching out in different areas, and then I'll start reaching out a little bit less. And I'm like, okay, I've approached this from every angle. I feel stable, settled, grounded, right? That's for me.
Okay.
And then we can get back together at our next meeting about a month after that first one. And then we take another hour, hour and a half to talk through things. And you'll come in with questions. Say, hey, remind me the difference between a guardian and a trustee or an executor. What do they do again? What are the skill sets? We'll talk things through, right? And then we'll say, okay, or you'll be like, hey, we really know who we want to be making financial decisions, but he's my older brother and he's 5 years older than me. He's in his early 40s. I'm in my mid 30s. He did it for my parents. Really, really trust him. As long as I don't mess up, he's going to die before me. What do I do?
Yeah.
It was like, okay, well, we need a backup, right? Is there someone you would trust as a backup? We refined those options, that brainstorming, we confirm those good decisions. We stress test stuff, right? I mean, I kind of jokingly tell people I'm paid to be paranoid. I mean, that decision-making meeting, basically everybody dies, right?
Hmm.
Because then it's like, okay, your first choice has died. Now what? Let's
Yep.
come up with a backup. That second choice has died. Do we have a third? And we go as far as we can to
Hmm.
come up with options. And if we're still in that situation of like, hey, what if they die and we've run out of names? That's my job to come up with legal mechanisms in place to create a succession plan at that point,
Okay.
right? Your job is to go as far as I can take you. And then it's my job to bridge the gap just in case and have some good contingency planning. And in that second meeting, it's to way oversimplify. It's, hey, Jared, who do you have in mind, one of your kids that is expressing an interest in the ranch, right? Are they asking to go and ride the tractor? Are they showing interest on the business side of the ranch? Are there any of your kids that you're thinking might be a good fit there?
Yeah.
Back to
Yeah.
roll.
So I'll just say, well, our oldest is definitely interested, but he's still pretty young,
Uh-huh.
and we want to keep our options open. I have seen other families who have tried to divide the ranch amongst the siblings, and generally that doesn't work out well,
Yeah.
either for the business side or for the sibling relationship. So I'm going to defer back to you and say, they're just too young to really know. And what would you recommend if they're at this age? Like, I want to keep the options open, but if I die today, I can't say that, hey, Joey, the oldest, is going to be the one that's going to get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the tough part. First things first, I mean, it's not a problem that you don't have clarity, right? If anything, I would have been impressed that you had clarity on
Hmm.
considering your kids are so young, right? They have a lot of time to grow and figure things out. In that situation, there's only so much that you can do to say, 20 years from now when you have a kid who is interested, it's really easy in your estate plan to say all ranching land, equipment, facilities goes to this child. And that's maybe
Hmm.
all. This is one possibility among many. 100% of everything to do with the ranch goes to this one child, and they don't get anything else, right? They just
Hmm.
get it all, and they just need to work it and make it work. And the other kids will split everything else, whether that's bank accounts, retirement plans, whatever.
Hmm.
In your situation, there's not a whole lot that you can do other than still have the language saying just equal split between the kids, right? Legally, there's maybe not a whole lot that we can do. At least I'm not creative enough to think of something. But something that can be done is that might be a time when we might set up a conversation with like a life insurance agent or something like that.
Hmm.
Because let's say you have 3 kids, Jared, right? And the ranch is, let's say, 2/3, just to keep easy numbers. 2/3 of your total net worth, including land, equipment, the cattle,
Hmm.
everything. All of that stuff is 2/3 of your net worth, right? So we're going to have to say a third and a third and a third to the kids, right? But ideally, what we would like to do is most parents like the idea of equal dollar amounts going to each child. Um, well, what do you do then? If the ranch is a disproportionate asset, disproportionately large asset. Well, one thing that we can think about, and we would have this conversation, is what can we do to make it so that the farm is less of a disproportionately large asset? And that might be something like life insurance, where you get a life insurance policy. Yes. Pennies on the dollar, right? You're paying the premiums. If you're in your mid 30s, it's got to be really cheap, right? So that is actually kind of nice because that means you can get more life insurance than you would 30, 40 years from now.
Mm.
And then you have that life insurance roll into your estate plan so that if it ever does come to a point where there is a child that wants the farmland, they can essentially, I'm oversimplifying the mechanism a little bit, but this is basically what we're talking about, is the child who wants the ranch can essentially use the cash that comes from the death benefits of the life insurance to pay out, to buy out their siblings.
Yep.
Right. And if it
Yep.
doesn't cover the full buyout, it's at least as a partial buyout, and the siblings are either gonna be on board with it. It's like, yeah, okay, we'll pay for it on the we'll let you buy us out on the cheap, or it'll be a combo of life insurance and some type of loan, right, to make
Hmm.
a difference. But any money that can be used that's cash to buy out that decreases the loan amount makes it easier for the child who's buying the ranch to keep the ranch as economically, financially viable because there's not as much debt there that they're having to pay back, right? And
Yeah.
so there's a couple different things that can be done there to um, do the best you can. And
Yeah.
sometimes the conversation might be there's no way that we can make everybody be equal, and
Yeah.
you're just gonna have to live with that. Um,
And
and that's a
Dave,
conversation to have with kids while you're still alive. As awkward and hard as that is, it's better that you have those conversations now so they have time to get used to the idea they can talk to you, they can vent to you, they can complain, they can ask questions to you, rather than if they find that out after they pass away, all they can do is egg your tombstone and take it out on the sibling, and
yeah.
you've lost the sibling relationship. That family unit has been broken up, and potentially the ranch will still be broken up in one way,
Yep.
shape, or form, right? Possibility. You never know. Every circumstances is different. So,
Yeah.
um, so those are some of those possibilities and things to think about.
Yeah, really good. I appreciate you bringing up life insurance. We're a big fan of that. We encourage that for two reasons. One, to be able to pay off any business debt, and two, for estate planning purposes. And sometimes on those estate planning ones, you can do the last to die policy, which is even cheaper if it's with a husband and wife, because women are usually less expensive to get insured. And so, yeah, and this is probably ought to put the disclaimer in here for legal purposes. This is not legal advice, right? This is not accounting advice. This is just a conversation of what we've seen have work and maybe some things that haven't worked.
Yep. Yeah. Better job, Jared, being an attorney than me. Good job
Oh,
on.
thanks. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I'll get an honorary degree here someday.
Yeah, right, right, totally.
Yeah. Well, this has been really educational, and hopefully this helps people to go in armed when they meet with their professionals. So let's just play out a little bit more on this scenario. What's the difference between the will and the trust?
Yeah.
And what should the trust own? And this is a legitimate question because it's still not clear in my mind.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, and again, like some of that stuff, right? And I'm gonna kind of tie a bow real quick on our pseudo make believe, role playing conversation.
Yep.
Lots of times in a best case scenario with a client, it's a 3 meeting, 2 month long meeting, or a 2 month long process.
Process. Yeah.
Yeah, and lots of times those meetings are an hour and a half, right? We just kind of sort of role played that in 15 minutes. And
Yep.
so if you're feeling kind of like Jared started out, feeling overwhelmed, and yeah, that's understandable. And two is you don't need to be, because a good professional will take the time, and more time than we've had, to kind of walk you through all of that and for you to kind of think things through. So don't be intimidated. Don't be like, oh my goodness, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't want to do anything. That's not the reaction that I would want you to have, right? I wouldn't want you to feel
Perfect.
overwhelmed, even though if I understand, I get it. Right. We just covered a lot of ground in that 15-minute role play, let alone our 45-minute. Like we're not even close to being done with our first meeting, and we're 45 minutes in, right? And we're
Yeah.
covering so much ground. And so way more ground than we would try to cover in a first meeting. So that's maybe a segue that I wanted to throw in there. So difference
Perfect.
between a
Perfect.
will and a trust. There's one big difference, at least for me. There's one big difference between a will and a trust, is that all wills go through probate. Probate is a court supervised way to pay off debts and final expenses and distribute everything out, right? How the probate varies from state to state. How much time it takes, how much it costs, stuff like that. Colorado is one of the best probates in the country. There are other states that are infamous for having an incredibly long, expensive, no attorney would ever want you to go through probate type of
Hmm.
probate. I'm not going to name names, but yeah, it's a wide range. But
Okay.
all wills go through probate. And so it's a public process. And so regardless of how good or bad the probate process is, it's almost certainly going to be public, which means people are going to be able to read the will, see what assets are passing through the will, who it's going to, stuff like that.
Okay.
Trust, another term for a trust, it's an unofficial term, but it's helpful, is a will substitute.
Okay.
A trust behaves just like a will. It allows you to pay off final debts and expenses, distribute everything out, but it can actually completely avoid probate. And since it avoids probate, it can be a 100% completely private process.
Okay.
We don't have to worry about people going to the county courthouse, reading the will, getting insights into your personal and family life that maybe you wouldn't have wanted them to have, which is theoretically possible under a will.
Okay.
So, which kind of leads into your other question, Jared, is like, what do we want to be in the trust? Well, the
Hmm.
answer is everything, actually, at the end of the day. We want to be in the trust. How different assets interact with the trust will be different. That's frankly a conversation for another day. That's more
Yeah.
detailed than what anybody listening to this today needs. But we want everything to be under the trust. We want the trust to own the businesses owns through the LLCs or the S corp, right? We want the trust to own the LLCs or the S corps. We want the trust to be the beneficiary of the life insurance policies, to ultimately own everything. And when the
Yeah.
trust owns everything, we can avoid probate, but the trust, so you're able to decide in either a will or a trust, like I said, who gets how much. So Jared, going back to the role play, right? Your three kids, a third and a third and a third, right?
Hmm.
Within the three kids. And you can actually decide when those distributions happen to them. I'll
Okay.
just kind of leave that
Yep.
there for now. But
Yep.
it doesn't have to be all at once as soon as possible after you die. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe that's not what you want. For a trust to be able to control who gets how much and when, those assets have to be in the trust, which is why
Hmm.
we want the trust to own or be the beneficiary of everything. If it's not, then it might not follow your wishes. So that's something to
Hmm.
think about there. So a will goes through probate, a trust does not. And if you decide to do a trust, we want everything to be flowing into the trust so the trust can control it and your wishes will actually be fulfilled in the way that you want.
Okay. Good clarification. It's probably outside the scope to talk about revocable, irrevocable trust.
Yeah, no,
Is it?
I wouldn't say it's outside scope. What I would say is a revocable living trust is good foundational estate planning. If you decide to go a trust route, a revocable trust is step one. Think of it as a generalist. As a generalist, good foundational estate planning. An irrevocable trust is a niche specific solution to a niche specific problem. Lots of times what that is if you feel the need for extra asset protection above and beyond LLCs and S corps and business planning, right? Number one, and number two is estate tax planning, right? Some states, so there's federal estate tax, which
Hmm.
is 30 million for a married couple, $15 million for an individual.
Okay.
Some states have state estate taxes. And so that's one of the conversations to have with your attorney, or they'll bring
Hmm.
up with you, is if there are state estate taxes. The only time that you'll really need to worry about irrevocable trust is if you feel the need for additional layers of asset protection, which for the most part, the LLCs and insurance is enough for the vast majority of everybody, or you have federal or state estate tax considerations that you need that you need to be addressing.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it. For the most part, though, for most people, they don't need to worry about irrevocable trusts.
Yeah. Good. 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 Well, hopefully that gives people some questions to ask. One thing that brought up to me is, should you look? Can you incorporate in a different state that doesn't have a state tax, or for example, like Nevada that doesn't have income tax?
May potentially for the business side of things. Ultimately, I'm going to say talk to an accountant. But
Yeah.
for
Okay.
but for income tax and capital gains tax, income tax and estate taxes, income tax and estate taxes, it's where you reside when you,
Okay.
especially for estate taxes, right?
Yeah.
It's based off of residency. So let's say that Colorado has a state estate tax and I die while being a resident of Colorado. There aren't any hoops that I can jump through to use Nevada estate tax laws, which I don't think Nevada has estate taxes.
No.
I can't say apply Nevada estate tax laws to me here in Colorado. It's your state of residency, and every state is going to have a definition of residency. And so the only thing you can do about estate taxes, if you live in a state with estate taxes, is either do, well, three things. Do some irrevocable trust planning to minimize the estate taxes or address them in one way, shape, or form, number one. Number two is do nothing, knowing that there are going to be estate taxes due, the risk there, and this is kind of pretty famous, right? Is the farm or the ranch might have to get sold to pay the estate taxes, right? And how much of your net worth is tied up in that. And number two or number three, you move to a state without
Okay.
estate taxes. That's pretty much what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I think probably one more question, and then maybe just be putting in the back of mind if you think of any case studies, people who have either gone up in flames because they didn't do it right, or like, hey, I'm sure glad they got this done and I was able to help them. But this question comes up, the stepped up in basis with my scenario. Estate taxes were fairly high during the Clinton era when I started inheriting the ranch. Passing from my grandpa to my dad, there was just a little bit of property that hadn't been transferred, and I remember the estate tax bill was fairly significant. So my dad was very aggressive at gifting us shares in an LLC, which held the property. That was the best thing that he could have done at that point. In hindsight, it would be better for us now to inherit it upon his death and get stepped up basis.
Correct.
What's your recommendation there? Should you gift it to the child or children that are going to be on the ranch or the farm, or should you let them inherit it?
If you don't have estate tax concerns, my preference would be to let them inherit it.
Okay.
So for all of you who don't know what step up and what basis is, so basis
Yeah.
is
Thank you.
from a tax perspective, right? So let's say you buy a house for $500,000, which is either really big or really small, depending on where you live. So that house appreciates to 750. You sell the house at 750. The capital gains tax that you have to pay is 750 minus 500, right? There's a couple deductions and stuff like that. Just ignore all that, right? Now, and so that's what basis is. It's not 750,000 minus zero. It's 750 minus the 500, the money that you put into it. That is what basis is, the amount of money that you put into an asset.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say you buy it at 500,000, it grows to 750, and you die. The current laws says the basis gets adjusted, or most of the time stepped up, because most things appreciate in value over time. But the correct term is adjustment, because it could go up or it could go down.
Okay.
It gets adjusted to its value upon your date of death, which is now 750. So if your kids sell it for 750 and the basis is 750, there's no growth, which means there's no capital gains tax due,
Yep.
right? Or if it does grow to $1 million, right? It's $1 million minus 750, not $1 million minus 500,000, right?
Gotcha.
That's what basis is. And so the basis adjustment only happens to the ownership in the deceased person's name. So if you gift it or to kids, or you put it into an irrevocable trust, there's no such thing as a perfect solution. So like Jared with your dad or whatever, he was prioritizing estate tax planning, get it out of my name.
Mm-hmm.
If it's out of my name, it's not part of my estate, which means there's no estate tax due because it's not mine, it's Jared's, right? That was the thought process, is the estate taxes was the bigger issue to plan for right? And he knew that if you ever sold the property, you would have to pay more capital gains tax.
Hmm.
But he was more concerned about the estate taxes. Now, he couldn't have known probably at the time when he gifted it that the estate tax exemption would just explode over the last
Yeah.
10, 15 years, right? Like you said, it was the right decision at the moment. And that's the tough part with estate planning is you're projecting into the future. So if you don't have, unless you have an overriding concern like estate taxes, keep it in your name. A revocable trust does not change this conversation at all. Keep it in your name so that when you die, the value of everything gets revalued to its value upon your date of death. And then just the tax calculation cycle starts all over again.
Hmm.
If and whenever it gets sold, taxes are being minimized.
Cool. Good answer. Good answer. Appreciate that. And hopefully, I don't know if it happened or will happen, that the agriculture will be exempt from the estate tax. Anyway,
Oh,
that would be,
interesting.
that's something that's being proposed, and I think that would help out generational agriculture a ton if we didn't have to worry about that burden and a change in administration changing it. So, but yeah,
Right.
back to the question. Any personal experience you can think of people who didn't take action and the results of that, or who did, and grateful that they were able to maintain kind of.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that I have any complete blow up like personal experiences with clients. I've had a couple that were close, right? We were in the middle of updating documents and one of them passed. We were still able to mostly recapture those wishes.
Mhm.
But there were a couple extra steps that we had to take, and it was a little dicey of whether or not we were going to be able to do it. I think that's the closest that I've been able to come. The one thing too that I would say is family relationships. I mean, I have a couple ones that haven't ended well. It wasn't because of bad planning. I know that's going to sound really self-serving. That comment is like, of course it wasn't me. I don't know that any attorney could have solved the family from itself because the family
Yeah.
relationships were so bad. That is actually a lack of communication and a lack of trust and a breakdown of family relationships. Studies have shown this isn't just me, is the number one risk to an estate plan.
Yep.
It's not the legal documents, it's not bad investments. It's actually a lack of communication and trust and poor human relationships. That's actually the biggest issue. So, and beyond that, success stories. Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple. I'm not a great storyteller, I'll be perfectly honest. But yeah, they did what they were told. They made good, informed decisions. And when I say they did what they were told, it was as I told them to go through the process to make decisions, and they made the decisions themselves, right?
Hmm.
They made the decisions, they went through the process, and they communicated with their kids. The document said what they wanted it to say, and there's I don't know that there's ever a winning situation because someone's passed. It's a how can we help strengthen family relationships and minimize the trauma? And there's
Hmm.
definitely been times when we've been able to do that, where we
Yeah.
didn't add to the mourning and the trauma and stuff and the sense of loss because the documents were ready to do what our clients wanted those documents to do.
Yeah. Very
So,
good.
yep.
Well, I think this has been good, and I know there's a lot of deeper we could go on this, but I think it's a great overview. And I'd just like to sum up and say, one of the most important things is to be proactive. Don't put this off. I get it. No, it's not fun. Nobody likes doing their books. Nobody likes doing estate planning. Nobody likes spending the money to go do it. But it's just one of those things. It's not urgent until it is, but it's always important, right? It's the important things, and the important things are generally, put on the back burner to the fires that we deal with every day. So let this be an invite to you. Set that as your goal. If you don't have it, and going into 2026, make that a goal, that you get an estate plan in place, get the entity structure right for you, and then have those conversations when everybody is healthy and when everybody's getting along, so that'll go a long ways towards creating harmony in future generations. If mom and dad, just like this client that you worked with, they sat down with their adult kids, they may not have all agreed, but they all left with the understanding this is what mom and dad want. And it sounded like it was just a very well received because they had the right spirit about it.
Yeah.
They wanted to do right. They wanted to be good stewards. They wanted to convey to their um, heirs that stewardship was extremely important to them. And I think largely it was that preamble document that they read, that they said, hey, these are our desires. This is what we want to be known for. This is what we've tried to do in our life and what we're encouraging you to do. So any final thoughts, Brandon?
No, I think that was a great way to finish it up, right? It's having the conversations with the right people. Um, you know, everyone is an expert in their own ways. So you be the expert in the ways that you're the expert. Encourage the professionals or work with professionals that are experts in their field and get everyone on the same page. And I think you'll feel pretty comfortable with what things look like at the end of the process. And stay on top of it. Things change.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely right. It's not a set it and forget it. Even the Constitution's been amended. And so, but it's a given. You should go back and reread it as situations change and amend it. So awesome. Well, thanks, Brandon. Yeah. Blessings to you and your practice. Keep up the good work. And thanks for jumping on the podcast today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Jared.